Seriously, when the going gets tough, you don't want a criminal lawyer, right? You want a criminal lawyer. Know what I'm saying?
Marcello has been protected by the skill of a very smart lawyer and the built-in guarantees of the US Constitution. My files show that on October 12, 1950, 13 years ago this week, I wrote about Marcello as follows. Real boss of the Mafia in Louisiana. He was reported to have been picked by Frank Costello at a meeting of the New Orleans Black Diamond Club in 1947. Known as the Little Man, Marcello was then an established gangster and racketeer in Louisiana. He had established a virtual monopoly on criminal activity in the area in partnership with Costello and dandy Phil Castile through the Beverly Club in which he owned an interest. Marcello's criminal record goes back to 1929, when he served a year and a day for a drug offense. Though not a US citizen, the immigration authorities ruled on December 3, 1938, that Marcello did not appear to be deportable. Yet he served 5 years of a 9 to 11-year sentence for assault and robbery, but was later granted a full pardon on July 16, 1955. Since his release from Atlanta, Marcello has been arrested 4 times, but has instituted such a reign of fear in New Orleans that few witnesses dare testify against him. Marcello's holdings include taverns, garages, the Dixie Coin Machine Company, Jefferson Music Company, B. Robertson Distributing Company, and Fogarty's New Orleans Coin Machine Company. After the publication of this information, the late Senator Estes Kefauver included Marcello in his crime probe, and on December 30, 1952, the US government started deportation proceedings against him. The deportation order was issued in February, but Marcello's smart battery of lawyers appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. This legal process took 3 years. On May 31st, the court ruled that Marcello was deportable. However, this was only the beginning. The Little Man has now made a total of 3 appeals to the Supreme Court. All have gone against him. The secret to Marcello's delaying tactics and the fact that he is still in the United States lies with Jack Wasserman, one of the smartest immigration attorneys in the business. Wasserman has handled cases for notorious figures such as Frank Costello and Nicholas Malaxa, a Romanian refugee. Malaxa was described by Representative Jack Shelley of California and Representative Frank Kowalski of Connecticut, among other congressmen, as the financial backer of the Romanian Iron Guard, which initiated the massacre of Romanian Jews during the war. Both Costello and Malaxa are still in the United States. After the Supreme Court ruled Marcello deportable in 1955, Wasserman conceived the clever plan of obtaining an injunction from the Italian courts to prevent Marcello's return to that country. Wasserman and Marcello's legal team filed a new round of motions, claiming that the New Orleans gangster would face persecution if he returned to Italy. Finally, in 1961, the Immigration Service, frustrated with the legal maneuverings, flew the Little Man without a country to Guatemala, where he was supposed to have been born. Alleged birth records had been found in that country. However, Marcello contended he was not an Italian citizen. Italy then withdrew his passport, and the Justice Department had to begin a new round of legal motions. Simultaneously, Marcello's birth records were questioned, but Marcello's smart attorney claimed the papers were forged, and the charges fell apart. So Marcello returned to his main base in New Orleans. The Little Man has invoked the Fifth Amendment 115 times before the Kefauver Committee and more than 50 times before the Senate Racket Committee. His record for moral turpitude is clear. He has had 2 criminal convictions, yet remains a citizen of the United States. Thanks to the legal process of Jack Wasserman, Marcello is still residing in the United States 13 years after my first column exposing him. This is one answer to the public's bewilderment regarding the ability of the underworld to continue its operations inside the USA. On October 10, 1963, in New Orleans, federal litigation continued against Carlos Marcello, a prominent underworld figure related to his illegal re-entry into the United States. This article details the latest developments in the case, stemming from Marcello's deportation to Guatemala in 1961 and subsequent efforts to have the charges dismissed. Carlos Marcello today remained under a federal indictment, charging him with illegal re-entry into the country after being deported in 1961. United States District Judge Herbert W. Christenberry on Wednesday denied motions by Marcello's attorneys to dismiss the indictments. Marcello was deported abruptly to Guatemala in 1961 on the basis of a record from a small Guatemalan village, which claimed the underworld figure was born there. Guatemalan authorities later branded the record a forgery and evicted him from the country. Marcello re-entered the United States after wandering through Latin America for a short time and eventually turned himself over to immigration officers. Since then, he has fought re-deportation, arguing that his original deportation was illegal. The United States Supreme Court denied a review of the deportation case last May. This marks the fourth time that Marcello's litigation has reached the High Court. The Immigration Service has been trying for more than 10 years to deport Marcello as an undesirable alien, based on a 1938 narcotics conviction. A significant obstacle has been determining Marcello's country of birth. Italian officials years ago acknowledged that Marcello was an Italian national, born in Tunis in 1910 to Italian parents. He was scheduled to be sent to Italy when the Guatemalan birth record was discovered, leading Italy to cancel the arrangements. Carlos Marcello, a prominent figure in New Orleans area rackets, and his brother Joseph will be tried on October 28th in United States District Court on a conspiracy charge. They are accused of conspiring to defraud the United States by obtaining a false birth certificate in Guatemala. The government deported Carlos Marcello to Guatemala in 1961, based on a 1938 marijuana conviction, but he subsequently slipped back into the United States. He is also under indictment for illegally re-entering the United States. On October 12, 1963, this article highlights the remarkable career of Jack Wasserman, a highly respected immigration lawyer in Washington, D.C., who represents some of the most infamous underworld figures in America. Despite his quiet and modest lifestyle, Wasserman has become a pivotal figure in the battle to prevent the deportation of notorious criminals, leveraging his expertise in immigration law to help his high-profile clients evade banishment from the country. This intriguing account offers insight into Wasserman's unique professional life, his family's involvement, and the legal challenges facing his controversial clientele. If you met Jack Wasserman at a church social, where you're not unlikely to find him, you might mistake him for a visiting clergyman. He is bald and benign, with a soft voice, gentle manners, and an almost angelic glow in his eyes. He is certainly the complete opposite of the television stereotype of the fast-talking, unscrupulous underworld lawyer. Yet this brilliant attorney's clients include some of the most feared men in America. Ex-convicts who had the misfortune to be born abroad and now fear deportation from their fortunes and lifestyles look to Wasserman to save them from banishment. Though his notorious clients are frequently in the headlines, Wasserman himself avoids publicity. He displays none of the luxurious trappings that underworld fees are expected to provide. In fact, he shyly admits that he charges only 1/5 of what he believes he should. His offices are modest, and his home is middle class. His pretty brunette wife, Marie, is active in her local Episcopal church, and he devotes much of his time to raising money for Jewish charities. Their daughter, Lorraine, 20, and son, Michael, 17, are normal, uncomplicated teenagers. The Wassermans are a typical suburban family, regarded by their neighbors as the nicest of people. Yet, on an evening out, their companion might be Carlos Marcello, who has a criminal record in New Orleans dating back to 1930. Russell Bufalino, a grey-haired, sallow Pennsylvanian whom the FBI has attempted to prove set up the Appalachian Crime Conference. Or perhaps Big Bill Leas of Wheeling, West Virginia, who has multiple gambling convictions. If in New York, the Wassermans might pay a social call on Mr. and Mrs. Frank Costello, the retired crime king and his wife. Ever since Al Capone was jailed for tax evasion, the underworld has become increasingly cautious about its tax affairs. This has forced the Justice Department to seek alternative laws to target the elusive racket bosses. Attorney General Robert Kennedy has found a weapon in immigration laws to use against many senior underworld figures who were brought into the country as children, often during the great immigrant waves of the early 20th century. Many failed to become citizens or provided false information on their citizenship applications, making them eligible for deportation, a fate they dread as a living death. The Little Caesars have nightmares of their empires collapsing, of being down to their last $1,000, and of never again seeing the bright lights and playgirls of New York, Chicago, Miami, and Las Vegas. This is where Jack Wasserman comes in. He is regarded as an expert in immigration law. The judges even call him Mr. Immigration. The word has spread in the underworld that Wasserman is the best man to fight a deportation order. His background is impeccable. He graduated cum laude from Harvard and is highly respected in the legal profession, having chaired the American Bar Association's Immigration Committee. He came to Washington in 1941 from a New York practice to work for the Board of Immigration Appeals. During World War II, he moved to the Justice Department to assist with the enemy alien control program. In 1943, he returned to the Board of Immigration Appeals as a member, remaining for 4 years before leaving to lobby for the displaced persons law. Soon after, he established his own practice, which has quietly become one of the most fascinating in the capital. How does Wasserman get along with his dangerous clients? Around him they behave like gentlemen. With a sly smile, Wasserman remarks, "The only strong-arm tactics I've seen have been pulled by the government." He was referring to 2 of his clients, the notorious Mike Spinella and Carlos Marcello, both of whom were unceremoniously deported. Wasserman does not shield his family from his clients. Michael has gone hunting at Marcello's lodge in the Louisiana bayous. Marie, his wife, once scolded a reporter for referring to Marcello as a racketeer. Their daughter Lorraine has defended Marcello and her father's other notorious clients to her friends at the University of Maryland. Though Wasserman operates quietly, the drama of the underworld is never far away. One of his first clients was Settimo Big Sam Accardo, whose police record spans 30 years and who is described in federal files as a top-echelon Mafia leader. Accardo eventually jumped $92,000 bail and deported himself to Italy, where he remains a fugitive from a narcotics charge. Jack Dragner, the feared boss of California rackets, once woke Wasserman at 4 o'clock in the morning, begging for help to fight a deportation order. Wasserman swiftly obtained an injunction to halt the deportation, but never met Dragner in person, as the gangster died before the case was settled. On another occasion, an urgent phone call sent Wasserman hurrying to the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, Georgia, where he met Frank Costello for the first time. The imprisoned underworld czar had been conducting his own legal research in the prison library and found precedents he claimed proved his detention was unlawful. Costello argued that a man sentenced to less than a year could not be held in a federal prison, but must be kept in a jail. Wasserman verified Costello's findings and helped secure his transfer to the Milan jail in Michigan, where it was presumably easier for him to maintain control of his underworld empire. 2 of Wasserman's most fascinating cases involve men who returned from exile, Mike Spinella and Carlos Marcello. Spinella had been picked up at the Willard Hotel in Washington and deported to Italy. Soon he became so homesick for his old haunts that he smuggled himself back into the United States. When word spread that Spinella is back, More than 100 federal agents staked out his regular hangouts. Yet, somehow, Spinella evaded them and got a message to Wasserman through a representative. Despite Wasserman's advice, Spinella eventually ended up back in Italy, where he spends his days on the Isle of Capri, living a life of leisure with rich food, large cigars, and visits from former girlfriends in Miami. "You can reach me anytime," Spinella told Wasserman. "Just address the letter to Mike Spinella, Capri, Italy." Carlos Marcello was deported to Guatemala in much the same fashion as Spinella was to Italy. Born to Italian parents in Tunisia, neither Tunisia nor Italy wanted him. Only Guatemala agreed to take him. Marcello was the sole passenger on the immigration plane that flew him to Guatemala City, where he was met with silence from the federal agents accompanying him. "They were under orders not to talk to me," Marcello later recounted. "But one guy offered me a cup of coffee." Marcello soon tired of life in Guatemala and snuck back into the United States. Just as with Spinella, word leaked out that Marcello is back, prompting another federal manhunt. Even with walkie-talkies being used to track him, Marcello managed to slip into his New Orleans home and contacted Wasserman, who was staying at a nearby motel. Despite close surveillance, Wasserman slipped past the agents at 5 o'clock one Sunday morning and met with Marcello. Later, he invited the agents to Marcello's home, where his client surrendered. Not all of Wasserman's clients have such colourful backgrounds, but he makes no excuses for defending them. To him, they are merely clients in search of a lawyer, and in his branch of the law, he is simply one of the best.